Hi, everyone. My name is Emmy Amoretti, and I'm Assistant Director of our ACU Online Writing Center. And I'm here today with my colleague, Christy Apostle, who is one of our awesome tutors. Say hi, Christy.
Hey, everyone.
So tonight's webinar addresses the topic of writing about others' perspectives in APA format. Keep in mind that tomorrow we'll send out links to the recording and slide deck for the webinar, and the links to the resources in the slide deck will be active. You're also welcome to email us directly if you'd like a copy of the APA course paper template that we use later during the webinar. During the presentation, please feel free to type any questions into the chat and we'll pause as needed to do our best to answer them. And now Christy is going to explain our learning objectives for the webinar.
Hi again. These are our learning objectives for this webinar. By the end of the session, we will have used the week 2 assignment for COMO 460, Building Collaborative Communication to refer to real and imagined persons, number 1. Number 2, cite personal communications and personal or professional knowledge. Number 3, cite and reference course resources. And number 4, write about others' perspectives. Let's begin by focusing on learning objective number 1, refer to real and imagined persons, especially in the context of healthcare. To prepare to write about others' perspectives, let's talk about why we might need to refer to real and imagined persons in this assignment and possibly others. There are several reasons for referring to real or imagined persons in a piece of writing. For example, you may need to include illustrative anecdotes. You might need to provide communication and leadership scenarios. You may be discussing historical, sociological, and other research on groups of people. Also, there may be information to write about that you gain through personal communications or information related to research participants, which could include information about participant descriptions, observations, case studies, and interviews. Now let's look at some examples referencing real persons in writing. The first example shows references to a general reference, and the second is a reference using a pseudonym. So let's look at the first one. One patient with attention deficit disorder expressed that the frequent high-pitched squeak of the elevator near the exam room negatively impacted their ability to communicate. So they have begun attending my sessions. Next, this one is the one with the pseudonym. Alice, a 12-year-old African-American girl, received diagnoses of dyslexia, reactive attachment disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder. She had recently been placed into foster care with a less experienced foster family. When her new caregivers indicated they felt overwhelmed by trying to interact with her in a supportive manner, I explained each diagnosis and its possible impact on learning and interaction. Okay, next, let's look at examples referencing imagined persons. The first shows references to a group of people, and the second includes references to an imagined person with a name. So the first example, if I needed to evaluate how effectively a group of soon-to-be parents attending prenatal classes plan for labor and delivery, I would provide participants with surveys. Number 2, for instance, I might have a patient named Marty with sensory processing disorder. Marty knows they will enter a crowded area with people of various ages, intense lighting, and loud music. If they feel anxious about the possibility of overstimulation, they may choose to take anti-anxiety medication prior to the event. Okay, there are several tips to keep in mind when referring to real and imagined persons to follow APA style. For instance, you will need to use an appropriate level of detail. Let's look at how this tip applies to Alice. one of the real persons from the examples that we covered. So Alice, a 12-year-old African-American girl, received diagnoses of dyslexia, reactive attachment disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder. This example shows that APA prefers including a specific age, 12 years old, rather than an age range, such as under 15 years old. Also, the example shows that a writer should present specific names of conditions. So we have dyslexia, reactive attachment disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder. APA prefers these specific names of conditions rather than generalizing, as if you were to say, as in types of anxiety. Okay, another tip requires ensuring anonymity of the persons you're referencing. Since the first two examples that we reviewed included references to real persons, we can revisit them to examine how they preserve the anonymity of the people described in them. So let's start with the first example. One patient with attention deficit disorder expressed that the frequent high-pitched squeak of the elevator near the exam room negatively impacted their ability to communicate, so they have begun attending my sessions. In this example, we see that a term such as patient preserves the anonymity of the participant, but you could also use a term like participant to preserve anonymity. Okay, in the next example, we're going back to our friend Alice. And Alice is a 12-year-old African-American girl who received diagnosis of dyslexia, reactive attachment disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder. So in this example, the quotation marks signify that we are using a pseudonym to refer to the participant, who in this case has been named Alice. And that just ensures the confidentiality of the participant. Okay, the next tip applies to using bias-free language when referring to real or imagined persons. For this tip, we'll look at bias-free language for one real person, our friend Alice, and an imagined person named Marty. So Alice is a 12-year-old African-American girl, and she received diagnoses of dyslexia, reactive attachment disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder. In this example, bias-free language appears because we have capitalized a racial and ethnic term, African American, and spelled it appropriately. In this case, APA requires no hyphens in ethnic and racial terms that include two words. So the lack of a hyphen in African American concurs with APA style. Additionally, in this example, we have not used male or female as a noun. Instead, you see a specific noun, girl. Other options that you might include, depending on your participant, are man, woman, and boy. All right, if we go back to Marty's example, in that example, we read, Marty knows they will enter a crowded area with people of various ages, intense lighting, and loud music. Here, the use of the singular they in a discussion of gender is irrelevant when discussing a hypothetical person. So because Marty is an imagined person, we need to use they in this example. Final tip illustrates best practices for referring to individuals or groups of people, whether real or imagined. Here, the individuals apply to the examples of real persons, and the group revisits an example for imagined persons. However, just note that you can apply the principles of this tip interchangeably among real or imagined persons. So first, let's look at the reference to individuals. One patient and a 12-year-old African-American girl refers to individuals that we've looked at in the examples. Other terms that you might include, other than, for example, patient, are client, which applies more in, for example, educational contexts, or the term subject. When referring to groups, You could say something like, I would provide participants with surveys and caregivers indicated. So in these examples, participants and caregivers are references to groups. Other options might include nursing students, respondents, and children. Okay, now we're ready to move on to the second learning objective, citing personal communications and personal or professional knowledge. A personal communication might be an email, a text message, an online chat, or even a direct message. There are two main methods for citing personal communications. You can do so either in parenthetical citations or narrative citations. So in the first example here, you see a parenthetical citation in which all of the information about the source is included in parentheses. My supervisor, who specialized in working with older adults, shared that using sensory cues can enhance communication with patients with dementia. In this case, L. Jones is the author of this personal communication. We include personal communication to identify it as that type of source. And then finally, we end with the date of the personal communication in parentheses. Now, in the second example, which is a narrative citation, we kind of shift to include the name of the person who gave the communication. We include that in the sentence. So in essence, you could say in your mind as a reader, L. Jones shared that using sensory cues can enhance communication with patients with dementia. However, a parenthetical citation is still needed. And so after the person's name who gave the communication, you still include in parentheses the fact that it was a communication, so that's our type of source, and then the date of that communication. In both instances, however, you will not need an entry in your references at the end of your document. Citing personal or professional knowledge differs from citing personal communications. To cite personal or professional knowledge, you'll be referring to yourself with first-person pronouns, such as I, me, my, and you might refer to your credibility about the topic that you're discussing. So we have an example here to illustrate this. As a psychiatric care nurse working in a community mental health center, I have found that developing care plans with patients assists them in weighing multiple options, including doing nothing to effectively engage in decision making. So in this example, kind of toward the start, the person has stated their credentials. In this case, the person is a psychiatric care nurse working in a community mental health center. So that gives them credibility to speak on this matter. And they have also used first person, which applies to APA style in the 7th edition. So they have used I. So I have found. Also, as we discussed with citing personal communications, whenever you might refer to yourself and your personal professional knowledge in these manners, you would not need to include an entry for yourself in your list of references. Okay, there are a couple of key takeaways that should be helpful to remember when you need to cite personal communications or personal and professional knowledge. First, remember that you won't need to include reference list entries for either of these scenarios. Also, you can raise your credibility when citing personal or professional knowledge by supporting it with research, as seen in this example. As a psychiatric care nurse working in a community mental health center, I have found that developing care plans with patients assists them in weighing multiple options, including doing nothing, to effectively engage in decision making. So now here is the support for the personal and professional knowledge. According to Kemp et al., a care plan presents the space to record actions that providers and a patient take to contribute to their well-being.
Okay, this is Emmy again, and we are going to pivot to the third learning objective. Thank you, Christy. So our next objective is to cite and reference the course resources. As Christy just shared, you will certainly be referring to your own experiences in this paper. However, you'll also want to refer to course resources to back up your discussion and provide essential background information for why you're talking about these concepts. And in particular, you're probably going to want to use the textbook. So the textbook is a book. That means we're going to write the reference following the format for a book. In APA, that means that first we put the names of the authors, last name, comma, first initial. Here we have two authors, so I've connected their names with an ampersand symbol. And even though there are only two authors, I've put a comma before that ampersand. After the authors' names, we put the year in parentheses, 2020. Then we write the title of the book, the edition information in parentheses, and the name of the publisher. Let's look at how the title of the book is formatted in APA. In APA, the titles of books, videos, web pages, journal articles, and some other source types are written in sentence case. Sentence case means that we capitalize only the first word of the title and subtitle and any proper nouns. So one way to think of this format is pretend the title is a sentence and you're writing a sentence. In this case, for communicating about health, we only need to capitalize the C because we'd only capitalize the first word in this sentence. And now that we know how to write the reference, we also know how to write the citations. So remember that APA style uses a format that we call author date citation. This means that to cite a paraphrase, which is information you've taken and put in your own words, we need to include the author's name and the year. To create an author date citation, we have two options. We can make a parenthetical citation or a narrative citation. A parenthetical citation is the top example on this slide. It can go at the end of your sentence or immediately after a borrowed idea. So in this case, I put Dupre and Cook Overton, comma, 2020 in parentheses at the end of the first sentence. The other option to write a citation is a narrative citation. This means that we put the names of the authors directly in the text of the sentence, and we put the year in parentheses immediately following their names. One thing to notice here is that because the textbook has two authors, I've used the ampersand symbol between their names in the parentheses to comply with APA guidelines. However, APA guidelines indicate that when I write their names directly in my sentence, I need to spell out the word and. We also can follow the same format when we cite direct quotes, except when you have a direct quote, you're going to need to provide locator information to tell the reader where they can find the direct quote in the context of the original source. So textbooks have page numbers. That means you can use a page number, as I've shown in the first example, Dupre and Cook Overton, comma, 2020, page 5. For a page number, we use the abbreviation P and a period. Keep in mind that if you're directly quoting, you can also cite a specific part of a source. And in this case, you're being asked to refer to box 3.5. So if you happen to choose to quote a tip from box 3.5, you can actually also cite it using box 3.5 as the locator information. In the bottom example, I have Dupre and Cook Overton with the year immediately after their name in my sentence. And then after the direct quote, I've put box 3.5 as a way to designate the location of the quote in the Dupre and Cook Overton source. Now, Dupre and Cook Overton is a textbook. So as you're reading that textbook, you're probably going to notice that Dupre and Cook Overton have cited a lot of other authors. If you'd like to cite an idea from one of the authors that they've cited, so for instance, pretend Dupre and Cook Overton cited Barnland regarding the transactional model of communication. In this case, you can use the formatting for what we call secondary citation. When we create a secondary citation, we need to name both the original author and the author whose work you read. So in my top example, I've cited Barnland comma, 1970, comma, as cited in Dupre and Cook-Overton, comma, 2020. Barnland 1970 is the original source. And the way I can figure out that they're citing Barnland 1970 is to check the citation right in the Dupre and Cook-Overton text. So after I put Barnland, comma, 1970, I put the words as cited in. Then last, I put the information for the source that I actually read, Dupre and Cook-Overton, comma, 2020. You can also create a secondary citation by naming the original author in your sentence. So in my second example, I've got Barnland, comma, 1970 at the beginning of the sentence. And then I've put as cited in Dupre and Cook-Overton, comma, 2020, comma, page 7 at the end of the sentence. In this case, I've added the page number because I've directly quoted. Keep in mind that since I read Dupre and Cook-Overton, I'm going to use the page number for the Dupre and Cook-Overton source, page 7. On your references page, you're also going to use the reference for Dupre and Cook-Overton because that's the source that you actually read. A reference for Barnland or the original source would not need to go on the references page. You also have this week some videos in your course resources. So let's go over how to cite these in case you want to use them in your paper. The first video this week is a TED Talk, and it's published on the TED Conference's website. So to write the reference for this video, we put the name of the speaker. Then we put as much date information as we have available. On the TED Conferences page, they usually give you the year and the month. So here we've got 2018, comma, May. Then we write the title of the video. It's in sentence case and italics. We put the word video with a capital V in square brackets. Then we list TED Conferences as the publisher and we add the URL. If we want to cite a paraphrase of information from this video, we can just use the speaker's last name and the year, as I put in parentheses at the end of the first example. If we want to directly quote, again, we're back to needing to provide locator information. For a video, we don't have page numbers, but we do have seconds and minutes, so we're going to use a timestamp. In the second example, I have the author's name, followed by the year 2018 in my text, and then immediately after the direct quote, I have the location, which is the timestamp for when the quote started at 9 minutes and 14 seconds. The other video from this module is a YouTube video, and it's an episode of the PBS Nova series, Doctor's Diaries from 2009. So let's talk about how to cite a YouTube video next. To cite the YouTube video, we're going to put the name of the account, which in this case looks like a person's name, Joseph Ashapala, but it's the account name. So we're going to put Joseph first and Ashapala second. Then we put the specific date information. YouTube generally provides a year, month, and date. So we put the year, comma, month and date, 2013, comma, January 12th. Then we put the title of the video in italics, followed by the word video again with a capital V in square brackets. This time we list YouTube as the publisher, and then we provide the URL. In this case, you're probably going to be using a parenthetical citation because the person who published this really has nothing to do with what's going on in the video. So I've only modeled a parenthetical citation here. If we paraphrase the video in text, we put the name of the account and the year, Joseph Ashapala, comma, 2013. If we wanted to quote the video, we would also add a timestamp. Let's explain a couple of unique features of this because it ended up being a really good example for a couple of unique characteristics. I already mentioned that we put Joseph Ashapala at the beginning as the name of the account. So even though when we have a last name and a first name, we usually would just put their last name in the citation. In this case, it's an account name. So we need to write the whole account name in parentheses, Joseph Ashapala, comma, 2013. Another thing I'd like to explain, because Doctor's Diaries is not in italics like the rest of the title, we're doing this because we're using reverse italics. Again, usually we write the title of a video in italics. However, Doctor's Diaries is the title of a TV series, which means if we were writing that, it would normally be in italics as well. Because we have something in italics that should already be in italics, we need to do what we call reverse italics. This means that while the whole title for the video is italicized, Doctor's Diaries is written in regular font to, quote, reverse the application of italics. Another resource you may want to use as you're writing, even though there aren't any assigned in this module, is a journal article. So we're going to also look at how to format a journal article reference. Here again, we have the list of the authors' names and their first initials, followed by the year in parentheses. Then we write the name of the article in sentence case. This time we have a title and a subtitle, and we have some proper nouns. So that's why we have capitalized the C in care, the A in Anne, and the names of the countries, England and Wales. After the name of the journal article, we write the name of the journal itself. And the journal title is in what we call title case. Title case means that all the major words of the title are capitalized. So we have a capital N and a capital R. The journal title is in italics, followed by the volume number, which is also in italics. Then we put the issue number in parentheses, and then the page range. And at the end, we have the DOI number formatted according to APA guidelines. That means it begins with https://doi.org/ followed by the number string. Obviously, again, since we know how to write the reference, we now also know how to write the citation. In this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 authors. In APA, when we have 3 or more authors, we use a format called the et al. Format. We use the first author's last name plus the phrase et al. That's ET period, ET space AL period. And et al. Means and others. So at the end of the first example here, we have Kemp et al. Period, comma, 2024, comma, page 340, because that's a direct quote. You can also name the authors directly in your sentence, and you're still going to use that et al. Format. According to Kemp et al., still a period, and then parentheses 2024, and then the rest of the paraphrase. Here's a handy chart to review how you would format the different number of authors in your citations. For the first author, we have only one. So we have their name and the year 2018 in both examples. For 2 authors, Dupre and Cook Overton, when it's in parentheses, we use the ampersand. When it's in our sentence, we spell out the word and. And again, if you have a source with 3 or more authors, we use the first author plus et al. Format. One more note about citing or naming authors in your sentences in APA. In the bottom row where I have those citations, the narrative citations, I've paired the authors' names with past tense verbs: stated, observed, and found. So in APA format, when we refer to what previous authors have done, said, or found, we need to use past tense verbs. So please follow this guideline as you're working with your paper. This is going to bring us to our last learning objective. Write about others' perspectives in COMO 460 Week 2, Assignment 1, Building Collaborative Communication. Again, we're going to be writing about others' perspectives in the context of healthcare. COMO 460 is the course in health communication. So for the next few minutes, we're going to look at the assignment details, and then we're going to discuss how to organize and develop the draft. So the assignment preamble says, the collaborative communication model from Chapter 3 of your text is an evidence-based model for improving patient-provider communication and thus improving healthcare outcomes. It is not only up to providers to become adept at communicating. Patients also need to be empowered with communication skill builders so that their own health outcomes improve from the patient-provider encounters. Here are your instructions. in a 500 to 700 word APA formatted paper that is about 2 to 2.5 pages. Discuss your own steps to improve your communication in the patient-caregiver interaction. If you are a professional caregiver, write from that perspective. How can you become more collaborative in your communication style with patients? If you're writing from the perspective of a patient or a family member of a patient, how can you grow in your communication with your providers? What communication tips, see box 3.5, stand out to you and why? And the last detail says, be sure to cite your sources according to APA guidelines. We'll also look at the assignment rubric to see how your points are distributed. This is a 100-point assignment. 60 points goes to the student clearly articulating steps they intend to take to become better communicators, and to summarizing the communication tips that you feel are most important. 20 points will go toward your APA formatting, and the other 20 points relates to grammar and style. So remember, even though this assignment focuses on you, you'll still be considering others' perspectives. You may have noticed that in the assignment, it says, your communication, how can you become, how can you grow? So why do we still need to consider others' perspectives in this context? Basically, remember that even though the assignment focuses on your own communication and perspectives, the communication model we're considering is collaborative. Therefore, you need to consider others' perspectives as well. If you're writing from the perspective of a caregiver, you need to consider the perspectives of the patient or family members of that patient. If you're writing from the perspective of a patient or family member, you need to consider the perspectives of and interactions with the provider. And in both these cases, considering everyone's perspectives all around is going to ensure effective communication where everyone is understood, and then the patient will receive the best care suited to their needs. So next, we're going to talk about how to organize this paper. The best way to get started with organizing is to consider the questions. For this assignment, we have 2 major questions. The first asks you to discuss your own steps to improving your communication and the patient-caregiver interaction. And the second question asks you what communication tips from the textbook stand out to you and why. So your answer to each of these questions can become a major section in your essay. And then we can turn each question into a level 1 heading to set off the section. Here's what this looks like. So the first prompt we could turn into a heading like steps to improve patient-caregiver communication. And we could turn the second question to a heading like important communication tips. In your draft, each of these headings is going to be a level 1 heading, which means it's going to be in bold and title case with all the major words capitalized, centered on the line in your paper. So let's see what this looks like. We're going to set up a draft. As you set up your draft, I really encourage you to use our ACU APA course paper template because it has all the settings for APA already set up in it. The font and the margins and the hanging indent for the references and the headings too. So right now I'm going to switch to showing the PowerPoint view to showing a draft that we've started setting up in our course paper template. Can we see the template now?
Yes, we can.
Thank
Yes.
you, Basil. And that was Dr. Basil Considine, who was the creator of this wonderful template. So we want to thank him for being here and for creating this wonderful tool for our students. So first of all, as you can see, this is the title page. We have the title in bold font, a few lines down from the top, building collaborative communication. We have 2 double spaces before we have the name of the student, the name of the program that the student is writing for, the name of the university, the course number and course name. The professor this term is Dr. Crystal Doherty, so her name goes next, and then the due date goes on the last line, which I believe is May 12th, 2024. You're also going to notice that APA does require page numbers. So in the upper right corner of the page, we have page number 1, even on the title page. On the next page, this is where we start our content. And before the introductory paragraph, we repeat the title. We don't put a separate heading for introduction because the reader knows it's the introduction, and stating introduction would be redundant. So under the introduction, we have those headings that I pointed out earlier. They're in bold and title, case, and centered. And we also have a separate heading for the conclusion, a level 1 heading, because according to APA guidelines, your conclusion needs a heading too. So let's take a minute and look at the different sections of the paper that we've got set up so we can see in particular how to integrate other people's perspectives when we're talking about how we're going to approach conversation ourselves. So in your introduction, you're going to want to provide just some background information. For instance, according to Dupre and Cook-Overton 2020, what is the collaborative communication model and why is it important in the context of healthcare? And what points about it are you going to make in your drafts? So here's an example of how we could write a thesis statement that previews the 2 big points about patient-caregiver communication and communication tips. Taking purposeful steps, including applying tips from Dupre and Cook-Overton 2020, can help healthcare providers like me improve patient-caregiver communication to support positive patient outcomes. Here we also see that the writer is going to be writing from the perspective of a healthcare provider. Under steps to improve patient-caregiver communication, I have pasted the questions from the prompt. And this is a great way to really get started with setting up your template. You can put your headings in, put your questions in, and then once the questions are in there, you can consider how to turn each question into a topic sentence. So let me show you what I mean. The first question is discuss your own steps to improve your communication in the patient-caregiver interaction. So I've borrowed those words and that idea to write this topic sentence, which is one step I have taken to improve patient-caregiver communication is to create a routine around discussing patient care plans. And then the rest of the details in the paragraph are going to discuss that particular step. And then I could add another paragraph about another step. Remember, we're trying to get to about 2.5 pages here, so we can write a couple of paragraphs about this, or one longer paragraph, depending on, what your writing style is. I've also added a citation here, according to Kemp et al. 2024. That is a citation that's going to support this sentence, or lead into this sentence. In this case, that is based on the writer's personal experience. We've done the same thing in the next section, communication tips. This time the question is, what communication tips stand out to you and why? So I've written this topic sentence. Healthcare practitioners should also heed tips from scholars and practitioners like Dupre and Cook-Overton 2020. Then I'm going to go in and explain useful tips that I think are useful and why. So down here, I've got one useful tip I have applied is if they discuss the strategy of asking questions, paraphrasing the answers, and asking follow-up questions, I can cite that. And then I can bring in an example of why is this important? How have I used it? And this is when I'm going to bring in our example of our friend Alice. So we may need to discuss Alice, her situation, and her caregivers, how they were struggling to navigate their new situation with her. So we've got that. And then we can bring in how the strategy helped us communicate and address their concerns. When her new caregivers indicated they felt overwhelmed by trying to interact with Alice in a supportive manner, I explained each diagnosis and its possible impact on learning and interaction, and then used the questioning and paraphrasing technique from the tip to explore their experiences and perceptions. As a result, this great positive thing happened, and that's why I think this is such a great tip. Again, our conclusion is in a section by itself. We can answer questions like, what major points have you made about improving patient caregiver communication in your draft? How can the steps and tips provided strengthen the collaborative nature of healthcare communication to improve healthcare relationships and patient outcomes? We also have our references page on the last page. The references do go on a page by themselves, and we present them with a hanging indent, which means that the first line is at the left margin, subsequent lines are indented. This formatting is built into the template if you choose to use it. And also you notice that we have the authors in alphabetical order by the first letter in the reference, in this case, by the author's names. So now I'm going to shift back to our PowerPoint, and Christy is going to review what we have gone over today.
Hi again, everyone. We are at the point where we're concluding our discussion of writing about others' perspectives. Today, we used the assignment from COMO 460, Week 2, Assignment 1, Building Collaborative Communication, to accomplish 4 objectives. Number 1, refer to real and imagined persons. Number 2, cite personal communications and personal or professional knowledge. Number 3, cite and reference course resources. And number 4, write about others' perspectives. Before we go, I'd like to tell you more about the services we provide in the Online Writing Center. You can check out the Online Writing Center homepage in the My ACU area. And once we save this for you and send this webinar for you and send it to you, you'll have an ready access to this link here. You'll also have ready access to the link for this video, a video for the steps to make an appointment and submit a paper to the Online Writing Center. Remember that when you come to us and submit papers to the Online Writing Center or other types of projects, we will work with you at any stage of your writing. You can ask for request 2 types of appointments. You'll see these listed on the schedule. There are email or asynchronous appointments. In these, you'll upload the paper, and we will send you feedback by email in 24 hours, and you'll see that listed as a Writing Center report. Also, we offer Zoom appointments. To schedule these, you will go to the schedule and click on those that are identified as Zoom appointments. And then when you're ready to access them, you'll click on the Zoom link that's in the appointment form at your appointment time, which is listed in Central Time. In addition, other services we offer are listed on the Online Writing Center's website, and these include webinars like the one that you're listening to now. There are 2 basic steps to the ACU online writing submission process. First, you will schedule the appointment at the Writing Center in the online platform. And then you will upload the paper to the appointment form. Even for a Zoom appointment, it's helpful to upload the paper a little ahead of time so that you're ready to go when the appointment time begins.
Thanks, Christy. Here's some more information about our contact information. You can email us at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. You can click this second link if you happen to be in the PowerPoint deck for this and schedule an appointment. You can also click the bottom link to visit the Online Writing Center website. We do offer several other resources, including, here's the link to our awesome APA course paper template. We have a link to our YouTube channel and our Online Writing Center, blog, where tutors have discussed a range of writing concepts and concerns from their perspectives. We have our website offering links to our other webinars, and we have some selected webinars on our YouTube channel. In related to the assignment that you're working on, if you'd like to see some webinars that discuss additional points about referring to other people in context of anecdotes, personal communications, just using appropriate language, you can look at our APA 7 underground webinar, which our awesome tutor, Dr. Ingrid, what is Ingrid's last name? Bradley, sorry, Ingrid Bradley did on mastering APA style. There's the slides and video there. We also have one for the same course, writing about anecdotes in APA style. It has some overlapping content regarding just discussing others in general. And if you need help with secondary citations, since there are a lot of secondary citations in your textbook, you might want to check out the slides and video for the APA 7 secondary citations webinar. So this concludes our webinar on writing about others' perspectives in APA format. And Christy and I thank you all for learning with us today. You want to say bye before I cut the recording, Christy?
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Bye, everyone.